Welcome to Breaking Barriers of Black Investors, the podcast that empowers and uplifts Black individuals with a passion for finance. Join us as we shatter the limitation and dive into the inspiring stories of successful Black investment professionals who have overcome the obstacles and achieved uncharted success in the asset management industry. Each episode, we uncover their journeys, strategies, and insight, providing you with the inspiration and motivation to break barriers in your own financial pursuit. Get ready to unleash your potential as we bring you captivating conversation with inspiring industry leaders. Subscribe to Breaking Barriers of Black Investors today to empower yourself for greatness. This is your host, Denard Michel, inviting you to join us as we break barriers, create opportunities, and empower the next generation of Black investors. Degas, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you doing, Denard?
I am well. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. I know this is the very first episode, and it means a lot to me to have you here on the very first. For those who don't know, Degas and I met a few years ago when I was studying for my CFA designation. And I reached out to him just to get his perspective on career advice after the CFA. And Degas took the time not only to give me an idea of the career path, but also to provide me additional guidance of what I could do after my studies. He also took the time to listen to some of my goals and some of my dreams and what I wanted to accomplish. And let's just say that I'm finally working at it. And I remember when I was actually done with my study, I reached out to him, thanking him for his guidance. So with great pleasure, I wanted him to be the very first guest that I had on this show because he took the time to help me out when I did reach out. But also, I wanted to share his story with the world. So thank you, Degas, for coming here and joining us on our very first episode. Traditionally, I know it's customary for the host to introduce the guests, but I wanted to take a different approach. And I want to ask, who is Degas Wright?
Well, I'm Degas Wright, I'm the founder and principal of Decatur Capital Management, an investment management firm dedicated to building sustainable generational wealth for institutions, families, and communities.
Thank you for the introduction, Degas. How's your week?
It is going great, and so this is going to be the highlight of my week, getting to talk to you.
That is awesome. You know, as I sit here and think about the very first question to ask you, I think the best approach is to start at the very beginning. What were some of your fondest memories from your childhood growing up during the 1960s?
Yeah, so my fondest memories were laughing at my father's jokes. One example, my mom was teaching me a prayer, and my father said, "Well, why does he need to learn to pray since I'm not old enough to have done anything yet?" Well, I thought that was the funniest thing ever. My mom did not think so. You know, I also remember fishing with my father. We would spend hours just sitting on the banks of the lake fishing with a bamboo pole, catching the fish, cleaning the fish. You know, I remember my mother sharing her love of books with me, going to the bookmobile at the school and reading the books with me. You know, other memories were having the family together around the dining room table and the banter and laughter, sharing the delicious food my mom would serve.
It sounds like you grew up in a family-centered environment and have both your father and mother. You mentioned that your mother loved to read. I'm assuming that you picked up reading very early. What were some of your favorite books? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I love books about history. So everything I could get my hands on about history, I just love to learn about the past. Learn to George Washington Carver, Abraham Lincoln, all those people, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that addressed history. I was just enthralled by it. And so that's what was my fondest memories of reading books, is just learning about the past.
You also grew up during the end period of the civil rights movement. How did your upbringing experience shape your perspective on life and influence your career?
Yeah, so one of my earliest memories of the civil rights movement was the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The reason that I remembered it was it occurred on my birthday. I remember watching the news with my parents on a black and white TV and how quiet the room became with the news. I realized that something bad had happened because I recalled the sadness in the room. Another experience was the desegregation of schools in Columbus, Georgia, while I was in the third grade. Up until that point, I was attending Carver Elementary School, an all black school that was a few blocks from my home. The summer before my third grade year, I remember seeing trucks and bulldozers on the big playground in front of the school. Our playground became a parking lot by the beginning of the school year. On that first day of school, I remember buses with white kids pulling into that parking lot. I also remember that Carver Elementary School would now have a music teacher that would teach us how to play instruments. I was assigned the violin, and I remember my parents taking me to the music store to meet with to rent the violin. So school desegregation resulted in real economic benefits for my community and me as a child. One, the school received funds for needed improvements, such as a parking lot. Also, the investment in a music teacher. So I was exposed to playing a musical instrument in elementary school. By the way, I was not a good violin player. As a third grader, I witnessed the impact of greater investment in my community. So perhaps that was planting of a seed in me, the importance of investing that would influence me later in life.
During high school, I would listen to my history teacher talk about the era of Martin Luther King and the desegregation of black and whites in the school system. Hearing your viewpoint provided some additional color to that. Now, it also saddened me that Martin Luther King died on your birthday. Is that the memory that comes to mind whenever it's your birthday?
It's not necessarily the memory that comes to mind, but for me, it gives me a connection of, obviously Dr. Martin Luther King accomplished a great deal during his life, but the connection of the end of his life on my birthday just provided me a unique significance of that day for me. And it always reminds me of the sacrifice he made that I could do the things I have gotten to do as an adult. So it provides a bridge, if you will, from his sacrifice to my accomplishments.
How did it make you feel on your first day of school seeing black and whites together?
It it was it made me feel like this is the way it should be. I remember the teachers. What they would do is that the new teachers were assigned, the new white teachers, for instance, were assigned to the black schools, predominantly black schools, and the black teachers were assigned to the predominantly white schools because they wanted to make the Board of Education in Muskogee County, Columbus, Georgia, wanted to make sure that the desegregation was successful. So they made a decision that the newest teachers will be put into different environments. And I recall to this day those teachers, and I'm actually friends with one of those teachers that influenced me back then. So it was it wasn't really a problem, and it was just kids being kids in a classroom.
Let's take a step back. You mentioned that you play an instrument. I'm trying to figure out, where did math come along?
Well, I was always good with numbers. The earliest memories. Oh, well, let me just tell you a story about my love with numbers and how it almost didn't happen. I was in junior high school, middle school, and I was taking pre-algebra. And so I was in the pre-algebra class, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't. I wasn't getting it, and I struggled in that class, and I didn't want to ask a question. I was too proud to ask questions during the class, and so I ended up with a D on my report card, the very first D ever made on my report card. And I remember going home that day thinking that this is going to be the worst day of my life. Uh, and when I got home, my father asked me, well, why'd you make a D? I said, well, Dad, I tried my best and I just didn't understand the material. And so he let it, rest. My mother kept asking me and asking me, why did I get this D? What was going on? And I told her that, I finally said that, well, I don't want them to think I was stupid. So I didn't ask any questions during class. And she looked at me and she said, you know, that, my parents, could not really help me with this new math, this pre-algebra. So they realized that the only way I was going to get that, or my mother realized that the only way I was going to understand the materials that I would have to ask questions and maybe get help from the teacher. And she said that, I would love to help you, but I can't help you with this math. You're going to have to understand this and get this on your own. And with that, I went back the next day to that classroom and I started asking questions. I think my arm got tired from asking questions. And I would go after school and meet with the teacher. So I just continued to ask questions because I realized that if my mother could have helped me, she would have. But for her to say that she couldn't help me meant a lot to me, that she shared with me something that she couldn't do. And that was the first time I had ever heard my mom say something that she could not do. And so that encouraged me, inspired me to do the best I could on that math. Well, I continue to ask questions. I continued to go after school to get help. And I brought that D up to an A. And from that point on, I just enjoyed math. And so that was the beginning of my love of math.
Interesting. I want to take this moment to transition to your career. How did you get into the investment industry and what were your barriers of entry?
Well, great. So I'm going to start from, I was always good with numbers, as we talked about. And so I majored in mathematics at the United States Military Academy at West Point. And I would later earn a graduate degree in economics from the University of Texas at El Paso while serving in the Army. So when I left the service, I pursued positions that could use my analytical abilities. My first position was with a consulting firm that conducted disparity studies, and I was hired to conduct statistical analysis. Disparity studies were conducted because the Supreme Court decision in the city of Richmond versus Croson basically indicated that the city of Richmond had established a minority contractor program to encourage minority firms to bid on city projects. A lawsuit was filed stating that the city of Richmond's minority contractor program violated the Equal Protection Clause. And the Supreme Court ruled to have a minority contractor program, you would need to show evidence of discrimination had occurred within the local area, be that city, county, or state. So that was 40 years ago, and disparity studies are still required today. That watered the seed planted many years earlier, how economics could impact communities. So I decided one day that I would use my talents and become an entrepreneur. Fast forward, I would eventually hone my skills while serving as an employee of the public transit company in Atlanta, the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. I started as a budget analyst, and with the support of many mentors, I would become treasurer and vice president of information technology. So during that period, I earned an investment industry professional designation of the Chartered Financial Analyst, CFA. And based on my experience managing the transit authority's investments and serving on the pension committee, I thought I could provide the service for institutions and individuals. So the barriers of entry were capital, credibility, investment performance, and assets under management.
How were you able to break through those barriers?
Well, let's first talk about the first two, capital and credibility. The other founder of the firm, Ralph Bryant, was a certified public accountant, a CPA. And I held the Chartered Financial Analyst designation. So that addressed the credibility. These were respected credentials in the industry. Capital, which is usually very difficult for a new entrepreneur to obtain. We self-funded the launch of the firm by utilizing our savings. And so those first two, capital and credibility, we were able to address. The last two would be investment performance and assets under management. That would take time and that would take additional resources. And so once again, we were able to complete the first two, and the second two took time and resources. And so with that, we were able to co-found what will become Decatur Capital Management. And we could not have realized that vision of starting the firm without the support of our wives and families. Because being an entrepreneur impacts the entrepreneur, but also it impacts their families in very profound ways.
You mentioned a few things, and I want to touch on a couple. By the way, congrats on your success as an entrepreneur. I tried to start many businesses while I was in college, and I failed, but I'm still going. So I guess that has to count for something. You know, for those who may not know, entrepreneurship is not easy. I want to ask you, how did you and your partner meet? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs who felt or who find it difficult to find a person whom they could start and run a business with. How did that relationship develop?
Oh, great question, Dinar. I met Ralph Bryan. He was actually the chief financial officer for that consulting company that I talked about earlier. And so I met him at that consulting company. And then we became friends. We also served together in the same church. Ralph would become the godfather of my children. And so we formed a bond that goes beyond just being professional, and we became friends. And so with that friendship grew the professional relationship. And he focused on running a business. He was as I said before, he held a CPA, was a CPA. So he knew how to run a business. And he focused on that aspect of our firm while allowing me to focus on the investments strategy of the firm. And so that became a very good combination. And so we've been able to build on that success ever since.
It seems like relationship and the skill set of the partners are the keys. Now, the skills required to run a business and make an investment are two different things. Focusing on the investment side, what are some of the top skills required to be where you are?
The first and foremost is vision. When you start out as an entrepreneur and starting a new business, you have to see past what you have currently. You have to look at the vision and what's the vision for the firm. So that's first and foremost. The second aspect, and we'll just talk about the investment vision for the firm. And then you had to also be able to use your skill set and be able to take that skill set and turn it into a strategy. So you have to have vision, you have to have skills, and then you have to have the ability to take your skills and turn it into a product or a strategy for a client.
Along the way, you mentioned that the support of your wife was critical. What additional obstacles do you think you would have had if you didn't have your wife's support?
That's first and foremost. You have to have the support of your spouse. And I will just share with you that very early on, I had started talking about starting my own firm. And I was doing some research. I was doing a lot of reading in the evenings at night. And one day, my wife just walked up to me and said, "If you're going to start this firm, why don't you just go and do it?" And with that encouragement, that's exactly what I followed her advice, because I found that following her advice is usually the best approach going forward. But without that confidence she had in me, I would have never launched the firm, and definitely would not have been successful with the firm without her support.
Walk me through the feeling of making a decision to quit your job to start the firm. I mean, you truly put yourself out there. Tell me about the feeling.
Well, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier with my birthday and Dr. Martin Luther King. He made a sacrifice that encouraged me, inspired me to try my best to really make those that came before me proud of me, and to also to help others. So as I look back over my life, I've had those opportunities presented to me, and I've tried to make the best of every opportunity. And so as it relates to starting a firm, being an entrepreneur, I too had to build it on faith, which was very important, and to say, if I'm given this opportunity, I have to make the most of it, because so many before me did not have the opportunity. And so with that, I have to move forward. And sometimes it may be on shaky ground, that I may feel that I'm on shaky ground, but with faith, I can accomplish so much with based on faith alone. And then with the faith of those around me and support of my family, as we talked about, I said that I have to give it a try, and I may fail. And it's just a saying that I share with my children, my adult children now. It's a saying that goes something like, "Ever tried, ever failed, try again, fail better." And so what I try to do is every time I fail, I try to, get a little bit further down the road and learn something from it.
Let us transition a bit. Given the unrepresentation of people of color in the asset management industry, particularly as a Black asset manager, what do you see as potential solutions or approaches to fostering greater diversity and inclusion within the industry?
Yeah, I believe that encouragement of people of color to enter the asset management sector is essential. I recall that as a young man recently leaving the military, I went to an interview with one of the top wealth management firms in Atlanta. As I sat in that lobby area waiting for one of the portfolio managers to interview me, I was excited about this opportunity. When the portfolio manager came to the lobby, he asked the receptionist, had Mr. Wright left? The receptionist pointed at me sitting on the sofa a few feet away. The reason that I shared that story is the portfolio manager could not see me, because the person he envisioned from the resume did not look like me. So I encourage investment firms that are interested in fostering greater diversity and inclusion within the industry to sponsor intern programs. We have sponsored an intern program since 2002 and have had over 100 students participate from various colleges, to include Georgia State, Morehouse, Spelman, University of Georgia, Emory, Fisk, just to name a few.
Tell me about that feeling of knowing that you were not who he expected.
Well, Denard, I was prepared for that, because if you go back in my background, is that I worked for that consulting company that did disparity studies. So I had read about anecdotal stories about people being discriminated against, being not allowed to start a company, not allowed to get contracts. So, coming from that reality, and now being in a place where I'm feeling the same type of issues, I was prepared that this is not something just impacting me, but it impacted so many before me. And so with that, I was just resolved within myself that I would be successful in this industry, even though there may have been others that did not see me as what they thought would be that person that they would be interviewing. So I made it. I was just resolved within myself that I would be successful. I would continue to strive uh, to be that success in this industry.
Do you still experience that level of needs expectation as a manager now?
I think it happens less now, um, and which is good because what's happening is that means that more people of color are in the room and they are excelling at different aspects of asset management. But we are still not, a lot of us are in the room, and we need more individuals to pursue asset management, to pursue investment management, because as more and more of us walk into the room, that makes it easier for the next person to walk in the room, to be, to be really respected, uh, and to be respected not so much for the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And that's, the message that that's really becoming more and more reality each and every day as we get more people into the industry.
It made sense. I remember you mentioned that throughout the years you had over 100 students intern at your firm. What expectation do you have for the students who are coming aboard?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I expect for them to be curious and to be curious enough to ask questions and then to be able to apply that curiosity, that inquisitive nature to solving problems. And we give them projects and we step them through we give them the steps to be successful in the projects. But at the end of the day, they have to apply that new knowledge and to complete the project. And so that's what we're looking for our interns. We don't expect them to know how to do a investment analysis of a company day one, but when they leave, they should have those skills that they have been able to hone with us during the internship.
How often do your interns come back thanking you? I know that it is easy for interns to think that the tasks that they are working on may not apply in the real world.
You know, it's very touching for me to share that I get contacted by students that have been through the intern program on several occasions, and that's usually the really high point for me during that day. Just one quick example of a former intern that went through the intern program about almost 10 years ago, and this individual now is a with a consulting investment consulting firm, and now this person is a manager. And what he did is that on our website we have a list of all our or majority of our interns, the year they were with us at the firm, and if they are working at somewhere, we usually list their current employment. And so this individual went back to our website and contacted some of those alumni from our intern program because he had job opportunities. And so now it's becoming full circle that interns that we've had in our program, they can now use that list of new interns or new alumni and network, because that is what it's really all about, is knowing people within the industry and when they go to that page, they see someone that they may want to hire, or they may be interested in working for the company that that former intern works for now. So it becomes full circle. And that's what we really wanted to do also, is to build that network that they could feel comfortable and they can reach out to others that have had similar experiences with the care capital management.
Networking is definitely the key to many success. And for you to create an ecosystem for interns to look at past interns to form meaningful connection, that is awesome to hear.
No, well, thank you. And it's a real joy for us to work with the students. And because, we're trying to, as you indicated, that the ecosystem, we're trying to set that up for them.
You have openly expressed your passion for art. I like to think of art as the story of the artist. What does art mean for you?
Yes, so no, great question, Dinar. And so the meaning of art for me is a bridge from my soul to the viewer. First, as an artist, you have to master the medium. You have to learn how to lay the paint on the canvas. It's like understanding the sentence structure of a language. Second, you have to master the medium, the language. You begin to narrate a story or scene from your perspective. But then, lastly, as an artist, and this is probably the most difficult, you want to bring the viewer into the story. And now the artwork has infinite meaning.
I have to admit, last time I drew, I was probably in elementary school. And let's just say that I realized very early that I was not going to be an artist.
What, what I would say to you, and this is something that I think is very interesting. If you go back to that childhood memory of drawing, you will probably recall that no one had told you you couldn't draw at that point. And so what happens, and this goes back to my love of drawing and art, when I was drawing with my crayons as a toddler, I was encouraged. People told me that, wow, that's nice. And that's why I kept working on it. So I would just encourage you to maybe pick up, that pencil or that crayon and try it again.
I will have to take your word for it. But throughout my research as I was preparing for this interview, I was on your website, degaswright.com, where you have all your portrait and painting. Wait, I want to make sure that I'm using the right term. Is it portrait or painting?
Okay, so I refer to it as artwork, and because I do have some portraits there. Portraits is a type of artwork. You also see landscapes. I have scenes from everyday life. So portraits is just a type of artwork.
Thank you for the clarification. Um, when I was looking at your artwork, I could see the inspiration that highlights your interest in cycling, experience in military, the investment industry, family, and cultural beliefs. Tell me about the inspiration behind the artwork titled You Made It.
Yeah, the inspiration for the artwork, you made it, is the arch that welcomes you back to base camp after hiking over the tooth of time at Philmont Scout Ranch. I recall how our crew was comprised of adult advisors. My son was a Boy Scout, and I was one of the adult leaders that went on this trek. And we practiced backpacking in preparation for our Philmont trek. Upon our arrival at Philmont, we were excited to finally test our preparation. Yes, there was a little trepidation. Were we ready to meet the Philmont challenge? Over the next 12 days, our bodies, minds, and spirits would be tested as we hiked approximately 70 miles over the Rocky Mountains. The last day of our trek, we hiked over the Tooth Ridge Trail and could see base camp in the distance. As we continued on the trail in the distance, we could see the wooden arch. And we, like so many crews before and after us, appreciated those words. Welcome back. You made it. Our preparation passed the test.
I have to ask, did your son ever go on another hike with you after that experience?
Oh, great question, Dinar. And so from that experience, and just let me share with you, as we were hiking towards that archway, I saw my son. The other scouts were, hiking faster and faster, trying to get to that archway. I saw my son fall back to the very, because I was at the very rear of our group. And I asked him, well, why aren't you up there with your friends? And he said, Dad, I just want to be hanging back here with you for a while. And so he and I walked under that arch together. And since that experience, he and I have done what we call high adventure trips every year together. And he's, will be 31 years old his next birthday. So we share the love of the outdoors, and that was planted with our time at Philmont. And so this is something we share. I love outdoors. And so that's something that we continue to do together.
Man, 70 miles is a lot. I struggle to do five with my wife.
Well, and you have to remember that we had prepared for this. We had practice. We had went on hikes, and so everything that we were doing that year leading up to that Philmont trek was in preparation. So by the time we got there, we were really ready to test ourselves.
How do you prepare for such challenge?
Well, it's like everything else in life. What you do is that the goal is to be able to complete a 70-mile trek in 12 days. So what we do is that we would go on the hiking trips, camping trips over the weekend. And obviously we didn't do it consistently for 12 days, but for 2 to 3 days, we would actually hike most of the day with a full backpack, because another thing about hiking in the Rocky Mountains at Philmont, what happens is that you have to have everything that, you have to have your bed, your cot, your sleeping, your food, everything has to be in your backpack. And so you had to backpack it in, and you had to get used to carrying that weight. And we practiced that. And we hiked, climbing over the mountains, the Appalachian Trail. We went to different sites to actually practice exactly what we would experience. Not exactly what we experienced, but prepared us for what we would experience at Philmont. So it's in preparation, and we spent the whole year prior to going to Philmont with that in mind. That was our objective.
That's inspiring to hear. Also, congratulations on having your artwork selected in the Art Basel Gallery in Switzerland. Now, I know they have one in Miami, but I mean, what is the feeling like to be selected?
That was the first time that I had been accepted by a international jury, and a jury means that you have to be evaluated to become a part of the show, and to be selected by the jury. And so I have a certificate now from Basel, Switzerland, that I was accepted, and that means so much to me as an artist, because I found out, doing my research about Basel, that it's a big deal to be a part of this exhibit. And so I feel blessed, very grateful that I'm able to experience being part of the exhibit.
Have you had a chance to visit Switzerland?
I have not. And so I shared with many that I was not selected as the top. I believe the top 10 would actually get a free trip to Switzerland. So I didn't make that bunch, but just being part of the exhibit is a big accomplishment for me.
That is awesome. Degas, I want to thank you for taking the time to be part of our first episode of Breaking Barriers for Black Investors, and for your help and guidance when I initially reached out to you a few years ago. It is truly a pleasure. Before I let you go, I want to ask you a question. How would you like to be remembered as when it's all over?
Well, first of all, Dinar, it's been a privilege to be part of this very first podcast with you. So I think, once again, thank you for asking me for this, asking me to participate with you on this. And it's just, like I said before, this is a great privilege for me. And so the way I would like to be remembered when it's all over, when my time on earth is done, I simply want to be remembered as that I loved my family.
There you have it. Thank you again, Degas. Hopefully we get a chance to have another interview. But in the meantime, take care.
Anytime, I'm looking forward to it. And once again, thank you for this invitation. I know this is going to do great things within our community. It's going to be inspiration for many. And I just very humbled to be a part of this journey with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Breaking Barriers of Black Investors. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. Your feedback fuels our mission to empower and uplift our community. Help us spread the word by sharing our podcast. Thank you for listening.